Hey guys, Matthew here. So in this video we're going through some basics of the asset editor in order to help you kind of get a better idea of how much of this is going to render. So if I press render, I'm not going to wait for the entire thing to finish. In future, if it's important that you see the completion of the render, I will kind of cut the video and move through. But you'll notice that I'm getting a 800 by 450 pixel image, and if I play with, so I'm going to stop this, I'm going to press this stop button here on the frame buffer, and I'm going to make the window a bit bigger, and I'm going to actually make it a bit longer, so it's clearly not the same proportions. I'm going to press render again. And you'll notice that the image is still 800 by 450. So just because I see a whole bunch of stuff in the viewport doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to see it in the final render. So under V-Ray, I'm going to go to the asset editor, which is this particular box here. I'm going to stop the render, and I'm going to go through these. So here we have our materials, which we'll get to in a little bit. Here we have our lights, which we'll get to in a little bit as well. Then we have our geometry options, and then we have the settings. So under settings, there's a whole series of things here, but right now I want to draw your attention to render output. First thing we can do is we can manipulate these numbers here. So by default we have a 16 by 9 widescreen, and perhaps we want a 5 by 4 landscape or a 4 by 5 portrait or a picture or something custom. So if I go and change these, you'll notice that the actual proportions here, now it's 360 by 450, change. And if I want to create a particular custom one, I can change these here by playing with the aspect, width and height options. So if this is 1, this number 450 times 0.8 is 360. So if I make it 1 and 1, it'll be 450 by 450. Now if I press or type the render button, you'll notice that I now get a 450 by 450 square image, which in this instance, seeing that my perspective view is actually quite large, makes the problem even worse. So what I want to do is I want to actually make sure that this safe frame option, I'm going to stop this just to make it clear, is turned on. And you'll notice that it gives me a pretty good idea of how much of that image is actually going to be rendered. So that's what's important in this render output option. First, we can control the ratio, the size of the image, its width and its height. We can use these presets, or we can move to the custom option and actually define how we want it as much as possible. We can also choose this match viewport option, which will put the safe frame over the entire image, and it will render the whole thing. I, for one, am not the biggest fan of that method for particular reasons, but so I'm just going to go back to custom, and I'm going to play with this kind of manually when I see fit, and I get a better idea of what kind of image I want to render out. So just a quick note on the safe frame. These 3 squares are the 3 separate kind of areas that are generally considered in a frame. The outside is where everything that's going to render. The middle one is considered to be where it's safe to have motion, and the inner one is where it's considered safe to have title texts. It's something from film, and because there's the possibility you might use V-Ray and RHINO in film, these standards are maintained. But for all we need to know is that this outer square is effectively everything that's going to render. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.